Alright, the next lesson is section 3.2, and it's on the addition and subtraction of decimals. I'm going to show you if you were doing it on paper. If you want to use the calculator, you're free to do that. But if you use calculator, you just type it in. So the exercises start on page 190. So that's where I'm going to be referencing the problem numbers, is page 190. So when you're adding and subtracting, the key is to line up the decimal points. So number 1 is written in the book like this, with the decimal points already lined up. So you're just going to add, and the decimal point stays right where it's supposed to. Number 7 was written horizontally, so the first thing I would do is to copy one under the other so that the decimal points are lined up. That controls where the decimal point goes in the answer. And then I would just add like that. That's a 4. You can't tell that, but that's a 4. Okay? So the next one is number 9. And again, you want to write them vertically if you're doing it on paper. So this decimal, even though it's not written, is understood to be right there. So I would just line those up. And there's my answer. The next part is on subtracting. Again, you got to line up the decimal points. But with subtraction, it's important that they have the same number of decimal places. And when they do, you just subtract. So, of course, you know about regrouping in order to subtract. And that's how you get your answer. Now, on this problem, the number of decimal places are not the same. The decimal is going to go here in the answer. This one's got 3 and this one's only 2. So I would put in a 0 there. You can always add zeros to the right of a decimal and it doesn't change the value. And remember, we're subtracting, so I would just subtract. And get my answer. Okay. Now, the next one I wanted to show you was number 21. Notice we don't have the same number of decimal places, so it's very important, especially when the lacking number of decimals is on the top number. So with that, I'm going to start regrouping. And once I've done that, then I'm ready to subtract. And remember, the decimal is just going to come in line with the other decimal points. Okay, so this one was written vertically. So I would copy this one underneath. Make sure I have the same number of decimal positions. Got to do some more regrouping. And we get our answer. Number 27 was the next one to look at. Again, you're definitely going to want to write them vertically. So since this one has 2 and this is only 1, I'd fill in the 0 there. Remember, we're still subtracting. And we get our answer. This is number 29. So I would copy this one over here. 2, 3, I'd fill in a 0 there. It's critical that you do that if you're doing it on paper. Now, if you're doing this on the calculator, you don't have to worry about that. You can just type it in exactly as it appears and it'll work. So I'm regrouping and I get my answer. I know I'm going fast, but remember you can always hit pause if you need to stop and copy something down. So for this one, we've got 1 with the decimal understood to be after the 1 since it's a whole number. And we're going to subtract a number that has 4 digits after the decimal. So I'm going to need to fill in all of those zeros and do lots of regrouping. And then finally, I'm ready to subtract. And whether or not you put the 0 right here is sort of optional. I typically don't do that, but your book probably does. It really is optional whether you put that 0. The only purpose of that 0 is to help call attention to where the decimal point is. It doesn't serve any purpose in terms of the value. So on number 35, I've got 100 with the decimal understood to be at the end of it, even though it's not written. And I'm going to subtract 34 hundredths. So I fill in my zeros. Lots of regrouping. And you get your answer. The next group of problems are some very simple equations. Remind you that to undo addition, you're going to subtract. So I'm going to subtract 17.5 from both sides. That makes that 0 out. And I get just my X on this side. And it's important to keep your equal sign in line. And now I'm going to actually just do this subtraction. To get my answer. On number 51, we ask what's been added to the variable is this. So you undo addition by subtracting. That zeroes out. We keep our equal sign in line. And now we're going to do some regrouping so that we can subtract. And I got that answer. Alright, the last one in this group is number 55. We're going to subtract this number, which is a whole number. So when I line it up, the decimal's understood to be at the end. That zeroes out and I get the X, keeping my equal sign in line, filling in my zeros so I can actually subtract, do my regrouping, keeping my decimal point in line. You can add the comma if you choose to. And that's all there is to this section. I think this is probably one of the easiest ones you'll have. So again, this is what I've shown you. is how you would do it if you're doing it on paper. If you want to use the calculator, you're free to do that. If you're doing it on paper, this is the key point right here. This is for addition and subtraction. Now that's going to be different when we do multiplication and division. That's why I'm emphasizing that. This rule applies for addition and subtraction. Again, if you're doing it on the calculator, all you have to do is just type it in and add or subtract as the problem indicates. So I'll post this to the assignment and you should be ready to go with section 3.2.